All right, hi. This is Matt Taibbi for America This Week. You might notice that Walter's not here. We have technical difficulties that we're working out, so we'll. Oh, can you hear me, Walter?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
I can. I can.
Okay.
All right. I already said hello and welcome. So you are Walter Kern?
Yes, I am Walter Kern. My hair is wild. I'm astrologically challenged. That's what it is. There was an eclipse either last night or tonight, a lunar eclipse, and my wife has been giving me briefings on all the ways in which it's interfering with normal life, and apparently it has technically too. But my problem with my hair is, I guess, just my own grooming problem. I'm back at my cabin, which means I'm in the grunge zone.
It looks good. It looks comfy.
Yep. But I'm ready to go, man. Everything's rocking and ready. Here
Excellent.
we go.
I've seen a bear in the last 24 hours, so I'm happy.
I've seen a bear in the last few days, a bear and its cub. She was teaching it to reach up onto bushes and pull down branches to eat berries. And it was learning to balance itself while doing that and falling down a lot. It was the cutest damn thing I've seen this year.
You should sign that bear, because probably if you work at it, you can probably get ABC or NBC to buy it for $200 million. That's my introductory joke for all the people who are waiting to give me a hard time about Bari Weiss, and I'm waiting to say fuck you back. But before we get to that,
but in a nice, long, eloquent way, not just the way you just did.
All right, so should we start with Trump and Chicago? Trump and
there's so many inroads. There's so many ways to start with Trump.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, I guess we got to get to the whole he's threatening to destroy Gaza thing.
I missed that. I missed that.
Well, it's Israel that's threatening to do it. They're threatening some kind of hurricane if the hostages aren't released, and so that's about to happen. But there's also the Chicago thing. So let's go with number 7, the Trump's Apocalypse Now post. We'll just go through that whole thing first.
Right.
So this is our president. And what is it? Apocalypse Now? Shouldn't it be Chicagolypse Now? Or Chicagolypse Now? I would have written Chicagolypse Now.
Well, it's an approximation. We get the point.
Yeah, I guess so. Shy Apocalypse Now.
Right.
That works. So so this is the famous crouch after the napalm bombing. All right. So I actually am a little troubled about the deploying of troops and the whole posse comitatus thing. I'm not sure I love that. Let's go to SOT 3, which is his exchange with an ABC reporter.
Spoke to the president as he was leaving the White House to attend the U.S. Open, and I asked him in specific why he was targeting Democratic strongholds like Chicago, like Boston, and all of this coming also as DHS has confirmed to us that ICE operations are now underway in Boston. And take a listen to what the president told me here.
Why? Let me ask you. Yeah. Really higher than Chicago? You're not. Excuse me. Do you know how many people were killed in Chicago last weekend? 8. You know how many people were killed in Chicago the week before? 7. You know how many people were wounded? 74 people were wounded. You think there's worse than that? I don't think so.
So, all right. And let's go to SOT 4. It's Trump from the same presser. And here he is sort of denying that Well, let's just hear what he has to say.
That's fake news. When you say that, darling, that's fake news.
Well, why
I
would
don't
the
go to
Department
war.
of Defense?
Listen, be quiet. Listen. You don't listen. You never listen. That's why you're second rate. We're not going to war. We're going to clean up our cities. We're going to clean them up so they don't kill 5 people every weekend. That's not war. That's common sense.
All right. Then we have Tom Homan. And this is something that we saw a lot in the Biden era, but not don't see as much in the Trump era, which is somebody else walking back the president's words. That's SOT 5. I think that is a different one, isn't it? No? Yeah, here we go.
The governor of Illinois responded to President Trump's post. He wrote, quote, "The president of the United States is threatening to go to war with an American city. This is not a joke. This is not normal. Donald Trump isn't a strong man. He's a scared man. Illinois won't be intimidated by a wannabe dictator," unquote. Is President Trump planning to go to war in Chicago?
Look, I think it's worth being taken out of context. If I said we're going to war, we're going to war with the criminal cartels. We're going to war with illegal aliens, public safety threats that rape children, that raped citizens, that committed armed robberies, that distribute narcotics that kill Americans. We're at war with the criminal cartels, and Governor Pritzker protects criminal, illegal alien, public safety threats every day in that state, along with Mayor Johnson. We proved that.
All right, Walter. So J.B. Pritzker and Gavin Newsom are making a lot of people are making hay out of this. What's your feeling about the whole deploying of, or the threatened deploying of troops in Chicago?
For immigration purposes?
I guess, isn't it also crime-fighting purposes too?
Well, that's unclear from what we've just watched. What's my feeling about it? Well, having lived in Chicago and having family in Chicago, I can tell you that it's a dangerous place. I remember when I taught at the University of Chicago on the South Side, sort of bordering almost no man's land. I was told by a policeman that when I wanted to drive to Midway Airport in the morning, I should not stop at stoplights. It would give people a jump on me. I was told not to walk off of the campus because, especially if I was carrying a briefcase that might have a computer in it, because I might be bundled into a van and have my computer stolen and thrown out, and I would be thrown out at some later stop. It was the most dangerous place I've been, and I was at a world-renowned university with blue lit panic buttons every block or so. So I will absolutely concede that it's a dangerous city, and its weekend murder rate is that of a war zone, really. At the same time, these things have to be done correctly and constitutionally, and I don't know that these people are making very fine distinctions or making arguments on that basis right now. Their arguments are all on what is required by a crime or immigration emergency. It would have been cheaper to build the wall. It would have been a lot easier to reduce immigration to the point that it could be managed at the border rather than in the hearts of our cities. And the argument that our democracy is deformed by the presence of umpteen millions of people from abroad who may or may not be taking advantage of our rather lax voting requirements is a good one, because for many, the very definition of democracy as ruled by the citizens is threatened. But the optics, yeah, I don't love them. I mean, I don't love them. But are these going to be extrajudicial detentions, or are they going to be lawful you know, lawful arrests over actual crimes.
Right.
I guess that's the question.
Right. If it's ICE raids, that's one thing.
I mean, this is a country that fought a civil war. Okay. I mean, we've had troops in our streets and in our domestic territories before, and not just then, many times since. You know, we had a march on Washington that MacArthur cleared out quite violently, you know, as one of his signal accomplishments before World War II. The use of troops in what are deemed emergencies it's not as novel as people make out. It's the rationale for it, I guess, that's somewhat new.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say about this. I know what I want to say about Bari Weiss, though. So should we just go there?
I'll add this.
Mhm.
The lack of concern about the underlying questions is curious to me. There's no concession of the need for these ends to be achieved. You know, it's all an argument about the means. You would think that there could at least be some common ground on the need to, you know, reduce horribly high rates of murderous, you know, marauding in a major city. You'd think that there could be some actual debate as to whether the presence of, you know, a massive number of people from abroad is something we have to deal with or let go. And yet there isn't. The focus is all on the instruments of achieving these ends, not on the ends themselves. And I'd like to see more of that. If they have a better idea, I'd really love to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, some of the numbers, it's been a while since I've covered anything that has to do with crime. Some of the numbers that I hear, particularly in terms of the number of people injured over the course of a weekend by gunfire, it seemed like sort of pre 1990s type numbers. Remember when we thought the cities in America were going to become unlivable, that people were going to move out wholesale? There was like a 15-year period where that seemed to be in play in the United States. But you're right. There's a total unconcern with the underlying issue. I am worried about the constitutionality of it. I worry about some of the other, possibilities. Like, is there another level to the reasoning behind federalizing law enforcement in America's major cities? I don't know.
As I've said, my impression is that they are there to enforce immigration law, and that they expect somehow that a virtuous dividend of this will be, a suppression of crime generally. That's how I understand it, at least.
Right. Yeah, so here's Alex C's comment. It's a pickle. If crime is so heinous, yet the local authorities refuse to deal with the problem, is it ethical for the feds to come in and help protect the citizens? So, yeah, I mean, it's tough.
What we're not having is a debate on crime. Strangely, we're having a debate about crime prevention and so on. But I'm alarmed that there seems to be no level of violence in the cities that rises to the occasion for these politicians. I've in the last few years, having grown up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or the area around St. Paul, watched what was an extremely civil society there really descend. I've watched a lot of people move, a lot of people leave, a lot of people leave the state and close businesses and so on. And yet there's no end in sight. There's no end in sight in places like Chicago either. I have family in the suburbs of Chicago, and when I go to a pizzeria or something there, last time I went, in fact, I heard the guy complaining that the gangs had moved up out of the city. They'd sort of picked clean the territory, so to speak, and we're now in his parking lot and harassing his business and so on. And what do you say to people like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, New York has gotten crazy. I'm near a couple of very crime-ridden cities in New Jersey, and it's even reached like where I live, which would have been unthinkable a couple of years ago. Yeah.
I guess I would say I'm in the waiting and watching
right
mode right now.
Right. Yeah, this is one of those stories, and we're gonna hit another one in a moment where I'm not afraid to admit that I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. I just don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of issues here.
If murderous crime can be constitutionally reduced in a way that respects, rights of every American to a fair trial, to lawful detention, to due process, and so on, perhaps it should be considered. And if local leaders are threatened by that, then perhaps they should ante up with proposals of their own.
Yeah. And it's weird because for a long time, the most aggressive and civil liberties threatening crime proposals all were products of fully democratic controlled cities. I mean, all of the worst innovations that we saw in the 80s and 90s, and the stop and frisk ideas, the CompStat, stats-based policing, arrest quotas, all of those came out of New York, Baltimore, Chicago, when they were run by Democrats usually, right? So there was a brief period in New York where Giuliani was mayor, but who was the guy who ran for president, who was the former mayor of Baltimore
I forget
in 2016? Remember, he was like the Keebler elf.
Yeah.
But he set the all-time arrest record down there by, sort of pushing that trick to the max of just picking people up for anything you can possibly imagine. And it didn't really reduce crime, and didn't really help the city. So I don't know.
Well, when the Washington move was being made, there were a lot of arguments that at least addressed the question of whether or not crime was going up or down. At least there was a stipulation that if it were going up, or an implication that if it were going up or if it were out of control, some such measures might be warranted. Now we're just sort of giving a
we're stipulating,
a blanket condemnation to the notion that extraordinary measures should be taken, when it appears, at least in some cases, that people have reached a kind of primal limit. And once again, we live in a democracy, and there's a question as to whether local control of the city and the larger question of whether, people should be dying as American citizens are competing.
right.
Do you have the right to sort of draw a circle around sanctuary cities, say, or other, and appropriate the basic obligation of the federal government to protect the safety of the people? When we're in so many areas right now in America, what we seem to be facing, and set aside Donald Trump, is a question as to whether people are going to, quote, take it anymore in terms of, economic threats, criminal threats, and others. They seem to be at a tipping point, to use Malcolm Gladwell's phrase, and whether we address this responsibly and in proportion to this concern for it, will determine whether or not we go one way or another in terms of extraordinary measures, because the ordinary ones seem not to have satisfied people.
Right. All right. Well, we'll see how that goes. By the way, it was Martin O'Malley was the guy I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So
I mean, Baltimore, I went there last time I was in Baltimore. I was downtown on a book tour, staying in one of their nicer hotels. And I'll be honest with you, within 1 block of the entrance to that hotel, I was in trouble.
maybe I oversold the Keebler Elf side of it a little bit. I don't know. I remembered it. I remembered him being more Keebler-ish, but I guess not. Yeah. All right. So, big media news last week is that someone we both know, or I don't know. I know her sort of slightly. Do you know Bari?
Yes.
Yeah.
I worked for Bari Weiss. I've mentioned before on the show that I wrote editorials at the New York Times.
That's right.
When she was an editor of the op-ed page, was among other editors. When she opened the Free Press, I was one of the charter columnists there. I wrote columns for a while before becoming preoccupied with other things. It's not like I quit. I've met her socially several times.
Right. So word comes out that that CBS and its new CEO, David Ellison, is he a Paramount CEO or doesn't matter. But apparently he's going to offer to buy the Free Press, and
the Free Press, which is essentially a Substack.
It's a Substack, that was started with $15 million in seed capital, which seems like a lot of money to me because you don't really need money to do a Substack, but whatever. You do need it if you're going to hire people, I guess. Right. But along with that deal, there was going to be the implication that Bari was going to be essentially in charge of CBS going forward.
You mean CBS News?
CBS News, yeah. So let's look at SOUT 1. This is the Hill story on this, if we could.
Now, Byers reports that Weiss, a former New York Timer, is set to score a role at CBS News. Whether or not her pro-Israel and anti-woke worldview had anything to do with the acquisition is unclear, but as Byers suggested, it could ruffle feathers in the CBS newsroom.
Reactions have been pouring in. Glenn Greenwald posting, quote, Larry Ellison's son, a family whose overwhelming cause is Israel, bought Paramount and CBS from Sherry Redstone, who has the same cause, and will now give Bari Weiss $100 to $200 million to buy her Israel state media outlet and put her in charge of CBS News' editorial direction. Name one view Weiss advocates that does not have massive acceptance in mainstream U.S. power centers. Quibi creator Mike Buvas posted, quote, from Walter Cronkite to Bari Weiss, what an incredible journey for CBS News. Oh, that's brutal.
I actually have a surprising perspective here. I'm sure the viewers might be surprised, but I'm actually happy for Bari Weiss. I think I relate to the story of the person who's just, get it out the mud, kind of build it yourself.
I do think it's an interesting sort of butterfly effect situation where because the New York Times was angry that they published an op-ed from Tom Cotton calling for sending the National Guard in the summer of 2020, we now might have Bari Weiss leading the editorial direction of CBS News. Like the chain of events to get from there to there is insane.
So that was my reaction. Is that the irony of this is like beyond belief. Here you have CBS, which as recently as half a year ago was a cheering section for the German meme police, and turned the stage that made David Letterman famous into a set for dancing vaccine propaganda, being taken over by a Substack dominatrix, essentially. What is not funny about that? How do you not laugh at that set of circumstances? So I laughed at it, and instantly thousands of people chided me for not saying the required words that Bari Weiss is a vehicle for an apologist, for a racist, supremacist apologist for genocide, et cetera, et cetera.
Mhm.
You cannot say anything off message ever with a certain kind of person. And this is like the fourth or fifth craze that we've had of this type, where unless you say the required words, it's not allowed. It just drives me nuts. But on the subject,
we live in the age of banners, pins, symbolic statements of support or criticism, and we have now reached a kind of maximum intensity for those. The word genocide was used of the trans problems for trans people until recently. The vaccine deniers and resistors were a death cult. If you remember, Trump's supporters themselves are members of a death cult. It is a time of ultimate rhetoric and ruthless and mob-like attacks on those who fail to, comport themselves correctly. That's the world we live in now. And to me, it's all gotten a bit deafening and a bit numbing. Here is another case of it. Okay, but we have to pause, Matt. Weren't you criticized by Malcolm Gladwell as a racist for your professed respect for Walter Cronkite? And now we have people holding him up as some sort of gold standard against which Bari Weiss is a brass poor substitute.
That never ends. So the other thing was Bari was the heroine of free speech because she spoke out against Elon and I didn't. Remember that during that the initial period of the Twitter files. And I got to point out, Bari and I don't see eye to eye about many things. We have virtually opposite politics. When she had a debate in Manhattan last year on the subject of should the U.S. still be the world's policeman, she got her friends, Brett Stevens and Jamie Kirchick, to debate one side, and Lee Fong and I were the people that she invited to debate the other side.
Right. That will get you no credit with the mob, believe me. It's what have you done for me lately?
Right. And with the Twitter files, I was very not happy about her initially when she was brought onto the project. I thought that meant I was being bounced from the project. I had this completely paranoid response to it. I didn't know her. She turned out to be very important to the project. She got us because she is a very entrepreneurial, aggressive kind of person in a way that I'm not, frankly. She got two of the most important things that we got in the Twitter files. One was we got access, sort of unlimited, unsupervised access to two search terminals for a period of about 36 hours. And that was during that time period was when we got the bulk of all the interesting stuff. Was during that period. That was because she pushed for it. The other thing was that she pushed to let us see what the actual Twitter PV2 viewers looked like. And I was with her when she did that. I took all those pictures that you see online of people like Jay Bhattacharya's screen where it says trends blacklist and everything like that. I wouldn't have gotten that story. She got it, right? I knew at that time, and she shortly after left the project because Elon had banned some people from Twitter, and she felt that this was an affront to free speech. I thought the stuff we were getting was too important to leave over that subject because I didn't think that was the story. I thought the story was the material, not Elon Musk. We weren't writing about Elon, so we had a difference of opinion about that. But she was celebrated as the free speech heroine then.
Right.
And now, obviously, people have they're going back and they're remembering that she's done some things in terms of deplatforming in the past. They remembered that at the time, though.
Right.
There was a controversy about that when she signed the Harper's letter too. Well,
your list of demerits and merits, your balance sheet in terms of morality and public ethics and so on, as these people construe those, will never outweigh the latest thing. Okay, that just never will. You can't draw up. I never expect to be judged by the totality of my record, such as it is. I will always be either attacked or praised for the latest thing I've said. But let me add this. What exactly is the controversy over another pro-Israel person going into the avowedly pro-Israel CBS?
It's Bari.
What exactly is the controversy over another person deemed to be comfortable with the establishment taking over a network that was comfortable with the establishment? All I see here is kind of no change, frankly.
Right.
Yet this is this huge furor. Now, we on this show, I think almost uniquely, among others, have called balls and strikes with media across the board and have made no bones about how it's come to resemble state-run media in many of its higher echelons. Is it any more state-run now because of Bari Weiss, or any less? I'm not sure. But why is she suddenly in the scope? I guess because they wanted something else.
Well, I mean,
are they expecting that this form of protest about Palestine and so on will ensconce itself in the boardrooms of conglomerate corporate media? That's not going to happen. And I have a feeling that once the Weiss reign, such as it is supposedly going to happen, takes hold, we'll look at the decisions as we've looked at the decisions of the old CBS.
And there's another aspect to this that drives me nuts. So the thing that I posted about my sole thing, I was just enjoying a little bit of Schadenfreude at the expense of the initiativeless, lazy, totally unentrpreneurial, visionless traditional media. Bari did two things that got her in position to get $200 million and run CBS News. One is that she jumped ship from the New York Times at the ethically correct time. When there were staff purges going on at the Times, and the reporters on staff were worried more about which people they could get removed for hidden sins than reporting their respective subjects. Remember that it wasn't just about the Tom Cotton editorial. The New York Times was going after all sorts of people internally. They ended up bouncing Donald McNeil, who was their best health reporter just before the vaccine. I'm sorry, before the pandemic. But when that whole thing happened, when there was the staff uprising and they got Tom Cotton fired for running an editorial, which was totally within like it wasn't like an out of bounds editorial. The role of the editorial page is to acquaint America with what people are thinking. And if you shut off 40 or 50% of the topics that people are thinking, then you don't have a newspaper anymore. You have something else. And when they did that, when essentially the inmates started running the prison at the Times, Bari very publicly and in her way, which is she has a flair for promotion, for self-promotion, which is undeniable. She did it in a way that was very ostentatious. She identified herself with the heterodox landscape.
And with her went her spouse,
Nellie Bowles,
another New York Times writer,
a very talented writer, by the way. Nellie is.
Well, I mean, I'll note for the record that no one else but Bari Weiss asked Walter Kern to write an editorial on the stinky nature of Epstein's sudden death in prison, which she did. Okay. That was a rather controversial topic, and I took a rather controversial stand on it after having been asked by someone who apparently didn't care that a lot of the world thought Epstein was, an agent of Israel or something. Or maybe they did care, but they thought that it was newsy enough that they should cover the topic anyway. Anyway, but aside from special pleading or for or against Bari Weiss, I'll simply add this: CBS News is a part of a giant corporate network, a legacy network, and one of three, all of which seem to serve the system in America. That they chose someone who the knock against whom is that she serves, the system. It is not, to me, shocking, astonishing, or especially interesting, really, honestly, that she has
Kel Surprise, right?
Yeah. Wow. Who did they think it was going to be? Taylor Lorenz, but aside from all that, I have no doubt that Matt Taibbi and Walter Kern will review the performance of CBS News with their, smart ass, completely uninformed and knee-jerk mode of appreciation, whether they know the person or not. And finally, I'll say this: the people who are going to come at you, come at me for maybe not having expressed, terror and upset about this, have been terrified and upset about things far before October 7th. And in the same way, they have used the same tactics of, why don't you have the black square? Why don't you have the Ukrainian flag? Why aren't you showing your vaccination records on fucking social media? The outrage has been continuous and multi-topical, and it is differing now only in its intensity, if that even. Where's my Ukrainian flag? Where's my black square? Where's my, happy vax stance? I haven't had any of them. So at this point, I gotta say, man, I'm like, I'm tired of it. It's not a kind of theater that I choose to participate in.
It's so exhausting. The whole "you must say the required words" thing. This is like 10 years this has been going on. It's been different crazes involving different people. And what's weird about this latest one is that a lot of the people who are most vehement in this case are people who themselves were victimized or were made targets of cancel culture in the past, and they're turning around and doing it to other people now. But
you know, in Bari's case, I guess she's perceived as a conservative by the general population outside of this Israel question, but she's really not. I mean, I'm here to inform you of that as someone who has written for her and, you know, been part of her editorial product. You know, I'm in the fucking John Birch Society compared to Bari Weiss. I mean, I've seen the free press, I think, apologize for the pharmaceutical industry unduly. I saw them excuse the Palisades fires in some articles that I couldn't believe as just sort of neutral weather phenomena that shouldn't be judged according to, you know, general fire precaution standards. And so I would categorize her as a sort of establishment liberal who is not down with maybe woke, you know, fringe, and who happens to be pro-Israel as she has been since the beginning. And I can't think of someone else in her position, since CBS News apparently wants new people and new blood, who would have been more likely to succeed to this position.
So exactly, and we had a person who's just talking about apologia for Bari Weiss. It's not. We're not apologizing for Bari Weiss. We're explaining the situation. So, Bari, just to complete the thought, she did what anybody else in media could have done. Anybody else of stature in the mainstream media could have done the high profile, I am leaving and going off to Heterodox Island to establish a brave new world there, right? And there were people who did that, right? Most of them were forced out. They were people like, you know, there was Glenn Greenwald, obviously, but there was also Matt Iglesias. There were a number of figures who were high profile, once upon a time leaders of mainstream media who found themselves mostly on Substack. And there was a moment where all of us were actually talking. Like there were Zoom calls about the direction of alternative media. Not a lot, but many of them. And you know, there was some talk of maybe we should create something like an alternative news network or something like that. I didn't think, I never thought that was going to work because of the way Substack finances itself. It's not economic. You'd have to get people volunteering to lose gobs of money to create a news agency. Like if you were to take all those people together and then just sort of divvy the money up, it just didn't work. But there was discussion of it. And the one thing that was clear, though, is that if anybody was going to take their Substack and build a functional news agency out of it, or something resembling a traditional news company, that person would, at the appropriate moment when the mainstream media collapsed, that person would be in position to get a gigantic sum of money, right?
I thought it was going to be you and me, man. I joked on Twitter, and anybody who wants to use the search function can find it, that at the rate CBS was going, Matt and I would be hosting the evening news. I made that joke within the last 2 months. Apparently, they're willing to go a little bit edgy, but not that edgy. I never expected they would. How did I not see this coming a long time ago? And the success of the free press, I'll tell you, I was sitting next to Bari Weiss when she named it. Should it be free press or the free press?
Really?
Yeah, that's a detail. It just happened. I was in her company
because there was already a free press, right?
The book publisher, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
in any case, the success of the free press as a commercial enterprise, which was rather astonishing. I remember she was telling me, and these were early days, what this Substack was earning, which I found flabbergasting and humiliating. Was not my doing. That success was not our doing. That success that attracted the backing of these investors was the doing of the readers and the viewers of the free press. And I don't know that there is another, quote, alternative or semi-alternative news source that succeeded that, that astonishingly, that notably.
Well,
So American business rolls on. What am I supposed to do about it?
Yeah, I guess the point is, there is no other candidate. Like if you're CBS and your idea is we're going to take somebody from the alternative media world and put them in charge of our dying network, which it has collapsed spectacularly. It's hemorrhaging money, right?
The Tiffany Network, Tiffany Network, the nearly state adjacent CBS, going back to the days of the Paleys, which in some ways raised, as I put it on the last show, raised liberal America and really centered the establishment in terms of a kind of muscular liberal foreign policy, in terms of sympathetic or not sympathetic, but even-handed coverage of the upheavals of the 1960s and 70s, things like the women's movement and so on. That network is I guess adjusting slightly, and that's all I see. That's all I see. And a professedly anti-Israel head of news at CBS. It's not my fault that that's something that was never going to happen. Okay, not right now, not in America.
Right.
And I can't stop it, and it's not my place to. I'm here on my lonely non-joiners island, a guy who's quit and been fired from more jobs than he's actually had. I think I've quit jobs before I actually got them. So I can only look on, and I can only look on in umpire-like objective, distant appreciation for the machinations of the big people.
Right. Yeah, it was never going to be. I mean, you're saying it was never going to be you. It was never going to be me. I have no organizational skills, and one of the things that it takes to be the head of a large media organization is just a relentless willingness to sit through fucking stupid meetings and do administrative bullshit for a relatively small margin business where you're probably never going to get rich, except in one case, which she found, right? There's only one way you can get like mind-numbingly barking rich in news media, and that is to sell a property, a small property, to a bigger property, right? And she did it, and it's not surprising that's all I'm saying.
Well, but here's one of the things that is unique and a little bit astonishing about this, for me at least. Now I'm older than Bari Weiss. I don't know, by 20 years, I would suppose. And I have yet in my lifetime to see a near peer take over the news department of a network. In other words, all those movements, motions, and changes in personnel at NBC, CBS, ABC, the New York Times, and so on, have all gone on among strangers, this distant class of insiders that somebody I actually have met and know got in there is kind of, blows me back a little. But that's the only difference. As I say, this is somebody who came from the New York Times, came from the most successful Substack, came from the Wall Street Journal before that, Columbia University. This is called the channel. This is called the system. This is called the man. This is called how it works in the United States.
So everybody's making hay about Ellison having avowed pro-Israel views, and his father having some kind of ties to the IDF. I'm not really sure what that is. I'm not sure that justifies Glenn calling Bari the Free Press state-run media,
Well, I mean, I have to defend facetiousness since I so often, indulge in it myself. He didn't mean that literally, I don't think. But has anybody seen Citizen Kane lately? It tends to be that people who are magnets, who seek, big press and media power, like Ellison, have a point of view and are using those mouthpieces and megaphones to express it. And the stronger it is, the stronger that point of view, and the richer they are, the more likely they are to find media a business that they wish to, dominate or, flourish in.
Right.
This all sounds like some kind of fatalistic, I'm just an observer stuff, but it's actually true. I am. That's what I do. That's what journalism is. I'm not an activist. Okay, sorry. I hope that the show and over the years has proven that I'm not here to wade in and yank the levers of power. I have points of view and so on, but this is far from the most upsetting, disturbing, or noteworthy occurrence of the last couple of years.
Right. Just people who own media, as you say, they have opinions. This is like I was asked by Freddie Sayers at Unheard last week, who was upset about Elon and Elon's influence in England. And people who own Twitter, who own internet platforms, they have a point of view, and Elon is expressing his. What's where there's a line that is more upsetting for me is when government controls that.
But Matt, I thought you were his patsy too. Now here you are having to describe pointillistically your feelings about Bari Weiss. Wasn't it just yesterday that you were having to, vouch for your independence from Elon Musk, who, whose vile text messages to you I have seen and you have put on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, and who's sitting on my account such that there's a reason why that's another reason why I'm not going to be running CBS.
And before that, it was Putin,
right,
and
right.
I got the Putin thing too. And I'm like, do any of you people want to talk about the matters at hand rather than the personalities and who's being blackmailed, cajoled, seduced by whom? Because then we can maybe start a conversation. But if it's my proximity or failure to, kick somebody in the teeth or run away from or condemn them, that is going to be the perpetual topic, then I can't help you.
So, all right. So should we talk about the matter at hand? Should we talk about Israel a little bit, or do we not want to do that?
Well, I mean, what's going on there right now?
Well, I'll
talk about anything with the proviso that is the subject on which I am probably least informed of those that we occasionally talk about.
Yeah.
Only in the sense that I've never been there. I have to say this every time. I've never been there. I never studied the conflict. I did not grow up with an obsession, Middle Eastern obsession, such that I know all the players and all the influences. But, I can go to the bar and talk about it.
Right. Which is not the same thing.
And by the way, I have tried to inform myself further. It's not like I redlined the topic. I haven't. I am very interested in it, but I'm also aware that I live in a world where people who are intensely interested in it and also very well informed have probably precedence over me.
Right. And there's my frustration with this since the beginning, and everybody's giving me a hard time about not talking about Israel. Why haven't I talked about Israel? Because I know fuck all about it. It's the first reason. It's a huge investment of time for a reporter to start at square one on a very complex story that you have no background in. Just to do what exactly? Like, I'm not sure what my value add was ever going to be on the Israel story. I'm too old to go. I have kids. I'm not going to a war zone at this stage of my life.
I was invited recently on one of these trips that's to which journalists or influencers are invited to, tour Israel, meet people, attend lectures and all kinds of talks. I saw the schedule. I declined. I declined because I don't do junkets. I don't not just do junkets to Israel. I don't do them to anywhere. I don't like taking people's money, which is one of my freaking problems. And so I guess I had the opportunity to inform myself, at least from the Israeli government side and those running these trips, or whichever organization it was, I forget. And so I guess that's to my credit or discredit. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So here's somebody, Purple Shizo. It's a genocide. It's not rocket science. Okay. Like,
then you should, you know what? Then you shouldn't be watching this show. You know what I mean? If I'm not kidding. You should probably be, if it's a genocide and you feel that you have the ability to affect it, doing something rather than, spreading discontent, because the fact is there's not much Walter Kern can affect on this issue. I could stand up and pledge, I could say the words, I could do much, but I don't think it's anything compared to what you can do by getting out there. Where were the giant protests this summer? Where were, I know that ignorance is no excuse. Actually, it's the excuse.
It's the
ignorance
is
the excuse. And ignorance actually is not the word either. Okay. It is, the word is something like focus. I tend not to be focused on things that I'm not focused on, and that you want me to, and that you're scolding me, I would suggest is not the way to get me interested. I don't know that America and its foreign policy toward Israel has changed much over the years, but that's who you should be lobbying. Not journalists who are perfectly willing and able to confess the fact that their opinion on the matter is light compared to on others,
Right. Okay. So here's someone who's saying his buddy argument for ignoring it is the same type of logic to ignore Russiagate, which they scold others for falling for it.
What's the buddy argument?
I don't know what that means. I'm not a news agency. Walter and I aren't a news agency. We're not the New York Times. We're not the Washington Post. And we didn't spend 3 years talking about Israel in some other light.
Nope.
And only to have it turn around and then ignore some new development in the story. I'm cautious about it because there are things about this story that make me nervous. There are.
It is also, let's put it this way. It is also an issue which has huge amounts of money and influence on either side, a lot of which is dedicated to social media and to, spinning in the news and so on. And getting through the fog of war on this issue, so to speak, the literal fog of war, but the fog of social media and media war in general, is an undertaking in itself. And I would rather reserve my mental, intellectual, emotional powers for those things upon which I already have an advantage, having taught myself over the years, and to journalistic topics that I've covered in my lifetime. I mean, I have not only have I never covered Israel, I've never covered war. I've never been abroad to cover a foreign conflict. I wouldn't know how to do it if you taught me. It would take a while to teach me.
Right. I didn't cover Iraq until I went. Really, I mean, I wrote a few columns, but that was a little different. And with the subject, there are things about it that just make me nervous. Suddenly, there's an assumption suddenly in the pro-Palestinian movement that terrorism is that the October 7th attacks were justified, that they were resistance. And what bothers me about that isn't that I want people to be talking about that all the time. It's just that I was under the impression until recently that terrorism or terrorist violence was something abhorrent and that we didn't agree with that. To sort of casually decide that it's appropriate in this case, we accept it. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable with that. I mean, I don't feel comfortable with bombing civilians either. But this is why I don't talk about these things, because I don't. They're subjects that have a lot of contradictions to them, and I have trouble feeling strongly about any situation where the two sides involved are both doing things that make me uncomfortable.
For better or for worse, I have kept up a perfect record since Russiagate of not being popular when the white hot fervor was at hand. I was not popular when Russiagate and Putin and the supposed subversion of the American democratic system were being discussed. I was skeptical. When the COVID hit, and suddenly, despite my observations and despite having some actual qualification to judge the matter, having access to all kinds of doctors, experts, and so on, and having kind of come from a medical family and being a person in America where the story was located, I wasn't able to get on board with the fervor, the hysteria that I detected around that subject and the vaccination campaign and the closing of schools and so on. When Ukraine came along and replaced COVID, I was not sufficiently pro-Ukraine. I didn't see this as the final, battle between us and the bear that would determine the fate of civilization and the balance of power in Europe, and so be it. Nor on the topic of whether Donald Trump was the next Hitler was I sufficiently exercised. I guess I'm just a certain type. And, in this case, however, it's not because I'm skeptical, it's because I am distant from it and have no way of closing the distance, really. But I'm perfectly willing to comment because, hey, I'm a creature of our times and I got a take on everything, right? If you want to hear half-assed takes on Israel, go ahead.
Right. So here's somebody saying it's a false equivalency. That terrorism.
I know. Hey, dude. Oh, what's a false equivalency?
October 7th and Israel's bombing response.
No one said they were equivalent. I'll weigh in. Okay, I'm a reader of the Old Testament. Okay, I am someone who has little devotions and both literary for both literary and spiritual reasons. Has read the Bible. I can find few proportionate responses in the Bible to attacks on children.
Right.
I mean, anybody who knows the first thing about the Middle East does not expect proportionality in attacks and responses between groups of people who are hostile to each other. Does that sound weird? Maybe it does. But when October 7th happened and the news trickled out as to what kind of attack it was, and that it was an attack on civilians, very specifically on civilians, very specifically on people in their homes and at music festivals and so on, I can't say I expected a proportional response in the sense of, casualties and military might and so on.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just I'm tired of the whole mandatory speech thing, like
the signaling.
The signaling. Remember the whole denounce Russia thing? Like that was
I remember all the denounce campaigns.
Denounce it.
Because I failed to get right with any of them. And and I'll also say this. If I were, and if any of our readers, listeners, viewers want to educate me, and if I were able to and felt I had the time and the ability to really get down on this subject at the expense of the other ones that I pay a lot of attention to, I have no idea how I'd come out, because I don't have priors about it. I'm not Ted Cruz. I don't have a, evangelical Christian view of our need to, support Israel if we're to be right with God. I don't have, anti-colonialist
I was going to say
ideology in which certain people are always right against other people who are perceived as the, colonial powers. I really, be honest with you, can't tell you how I'd come out with 6 months of study. I have no idea.
I mean, some of the questions are really difficult ones. Do countries have the right to be theocracies? This is a thing that Zoran Mandami on good I think it was Good Morning New York said, they asked him if he favored Israel's right to exist, and he says, I favor Israel's right to exist with equal rights. And then he said something like, where there's no hierarchy of citizenship based on religion. I favor their right to exist if there's no hierarchy of citizenship based on religion. Now, I wouldn't want to live in a theocracy, but if we're going to suddenly start saying that theocracies can't exist, then
Israel's not a theocracy.
Well, it's a country that gives preferential treatment to certain kinds of to Jewish people.
Yes, defined as an ethnicity.
Defined as an ethnicity. Well,
Israel, as I understand it, is one of the most, secular states in terms of governance.
It is,
except for its preference for, those who ethnically belong in its homeland. Now we can debate that, but it does. A theocracy, to me, a theocracy is something like Iran.
Right.
Various states that establish Islam as the legal basis for their policing, their legislation, and so on. Does Israel make everybody stay at home on the Sabbath? I'm not aware that it does.
No, it's not that extreme, but it does confer different benefits to people who are Jewish than it does to other people. Right. which is a reason that there is. I mean, it's the central problem of this whole thing, is that Israel can't permit, a numerically superior amount of Palestinians to vote in their elections, and sort of rework the nature of the state. But should they have the right to prevent that? Right? Like some people compare this to South Africa, the apartheid, right? But I don't know. I think it's a very difficult question. Like, are we now saying that we're not going to let Saudi Arabia, Mauritania, Afghanistan, Vatican City, and a host of other countries?
Vatican City.
Well, I mean, look,
no, it's a state. It is a state of sorts legally, right?
There are also there's a number of states that are where the official religion is constitutionally Buddhism, right? And that's a fact of life, and I believe Cambodia, Thailand, there's some others I'm probably not thinking of, but if we're going to say we're not going to allow states to give preferential treatment to members of a certain religion, then that's a big change in our outlook toward the entire world all of a sudden. Isn't it?
And may I pause and say, if we're going to say that the world should be this way or that way, or people dwelling on other continents or islands should be this or that way, I guess we have a right to. But that feels a lot like American solipsism to me. And it feels a lot like the kind of thing that gets us into wars and ends up with us siding with one group or another on behalf of democracy, or going back to Mark Twain's days, enlightened Christianity, and killing a lot of people. It is the opposition to these sort of states that Mondamini finds so, finds so objectionable, that is often the entry point for us just fucking leveling places and taking the more secular or democratic group, or whichever one happens to be in our favor, we feel, and taking their side in a violent way against other sides. I don't know. I live in a world now in which I'm not sure America is not only the world's policeman, but I don't know that they're the world's democratic clergyman either, who should go around deciding who has too much religiosity, too much ethnocentricity in the makeup of their nation. I can talk about it from bleachers standpoint, but do I think we should be down there in every game?
Right. No, I don't. I mean, I don't think so. And it's just it's an issue where the frustration for me with this is everyone says it's so easy. Really? That's an easy question for you?
What do people think states and nations are?
Right. Exactly.
States and nations tend to not just be, though they sometimes are, lines drawn on a map, maybe by a British administrator.
Right.
How do they think Bangladesh and Pakistan were separated from India proper along religious lines? How do they think that various countries in Europe have been separated from one another along linguistic and tribal lines? Let's not forget Europe has tribes too. Coming from one of the Magyars of Hungary, I know that there are at least 20 different groups in Hungary, that all of which thinks that they should be supreme, and many of which cause the other ones to leave for America at some point. America as the great overflow room for the warring ethnic groups of the world, I guess can sit on its high horse now that we're all safe here, and judge the rest. But if we do that, I hope that we remain academic about it rather than constantly violent, which has been our record.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're now in a, and who are we really to do it? Because I've seen over the last few years a kind of Russophobe streak break out in America. Set aside this Israel conflict before it happened, before this, Gaza October 7th phase. I've seen anti-Semitism in America. America has its own problems. Go to any prison and see how they distribute themselves among gangs of, black, white, Hispanic, this, that, and the other thing. We haven't settled these questions ourselves.
No, and I don't think it's our job to settle these other questions either. To me, it feels like a holy war. It doesn't seem morally clear cut to me. If it seems morally clear cut to you, then you're comfortable with things that I can't be comfortable with. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I can feel negatively about a lot of the things that are happening, but I can't feel that all of the negativity is on one side and not the other. I don't think it can be sorted that way. At least I haven't. I don't think it's that clear. All right, people are getting tired of us talking about this, apparently. So could you?
That was the goal.
Right.
I mean, it's not a good commercial goal to tire out your audience, but I'll sit here for as long as I, can be upright and bore you on a subject that you can change the channel and get much more trenchant commentary on, frankly.
Right. This is why we don't talk about Israel, right? There's lots of other people who talk about Israel with passion and without agonizing discomfort. But that's what you get here. So we're all for you.
I will note that having a grandparent by the last name of Stein, that when I note that fact on Twitter, I get "you Jew." I will note that there is a lot of rather spiteful, vehement, and I think cruel rhetoric around this subject. And when I do get it, it doesn't help me want to wade in further to this morass. I'll say that. That's it.
Right. Sorry, just with this one person. It's not cut and dry when I lie and say this about Israel is theocracy. But instead, what it's really about is 30 billion in taxpayer money and a brutal Ashkenaz ethno-state.
Right. As opposed to Sephardic, he means, or she.
Yeah. So Israel's not a theocracy, but it is a brutal Ashkenaz ethno-state?
Yeah.
All right.
According to this person. But they did pay $10, so they're obviously not too offended, right?
Right. And I've already said I'm not in favor of the United States funding this. By the way, so has the Free Press. The Jacob Siegel wrote a piece in there titled "End U.S. Aid to Israel," which seems like an example of something that would be anti-establishment, but whatever. Bari isn't. I don't know that, and I'm sure that's not her feeling, but she did publish it. All right, let's go to Sat 7, the Charlotte TV report on the story they're talking about.
Details in a deadly stabbing on a cat's rail line. Thanks for joining us for your news at 6. I'm Siobhan Bryan. It was 2 weeks ago today that this woman, Irina Zarutska, a Ukrainian refugee, was killed while riding the light rail in South Charlotte. Since that time, there have been several questions about what happened, why it happened, and could it have been prevented. Today, CATS released surveillance video of the events leading up to and after her murder. And we want to warn you, some of these images could be considered disturbing to our viewers. We're not sharing images of the attack, but rather what led up to it. WBTV anchor Jamie Boll joins me live in studio with more on that video. Jamie?
Yeah, Siobhan, first, before we show you anything, we think it's important for everyone at home to understand the process we go through in cases like this. awful things happen. Sometimes our photojournalists are there for the incidents. Other times we get video from police body cameras, or in this case, Charlotte Area Transit. We request video from agencies all the time. We do it to confirm what we have been told is backed up by the available video. It's about transparency. It's about confirmation. Now, when we get video like we did today, it doesn't just mean we put it on the air. In fact, often we don't show it, or it's heavily edited, especially when it's violent and graphic. We ask questions of ourselves. Does this video show us something important? Does it give us new or better insight into what happened? Is there news value in showing it? And then we factor in decency and privacy. Tonight, we've decided to air a portion of the video provided by Katz. We're doing that because it verifies what we've been told about this incident, and that is newsworthy given the public attention and the demands for safety improvements. We will not be showing the actual stabbing itself.
It's 9:46 p.m. You'll notice right away, this looks like...
Have you seen this, Walter? I haven't.
Aboard the light rail.
Yeah, I've seen it.
People are doing what they do these days, keeping to themselves, scrolling on their phones as they ride along. The man accused in the killing, DeCarlos Brown, is in the red hoodie on the right side of your screen. He appears to be maybe a little emotional, perhaps a little agitated, but nothing disruptive. There's nothing that gets anyone's attention. About 30 seconds later, Irina Zarutska boards. She's wearing a hat and a t-shirt from a pizzeria, and she sits in the row in front of Brown. She has earbuds in and is looking at her phone. She too is just minding her own business. They ride along for around 4 minutes with nothing unusual happening. Then around 9:50 p.m., Brown reaches into a pocket. We've zoomed in on it here. He pulls out a pocket knife. No one notices a thing. Seconds later, he would stand up, and from behind, unprovoked, as we stop the video, he would stab the young woman several times. She had
All right,
no
okay, we get
chance
it.
to defend.
So this turns out to be somebody who was in and out of the system 14 times. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the number I've seen quoted, in numerous places. I haven't reported on it and confirmed it myself with the authorities, but that's what they're saying.
Okay. And let's watch the Trump thing. No, Sod 8 just quickly before we move on.
Well, I can I comment on the video?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Times? I found the narration of the video a little odd. I don't know that it captured what I saw. I saw somebody who looks pretty scared sit down, a rather slight of frame and frightened and nervous young woman who obeyed the compact on public transportation, not to notice, not to look around, not to, and I didn't see that everybody on the train felt there was nothing wrong. I know that having ridden on trains, if you think something's wrong, you generally stare at your feet. There's a lot of radar in those situations, and I saw a lot of radar going around that train car. And I saw a guy who didn't appear emotional. He appeared to be fucking crazy, okay? He appeared to be having some kind of episode. He was having strange expressions on his face that were unprovoked by anything going on. So another day on the bus, in a way, in America. And but what made it not just a day on the bus was this suddenly outbreak of deathly violence. And in the past in America, we've had some crimes, individual crimes like this. There's Kitty, what was her name? Kitty Genovese, back in the 60s or early 70s, a woman who was killed or beaten up in New York. I believe it was Brooklyn, and there were a lot of bystanders, no one who intervened, and it became shorthand for America's apathy and its crime problem and its sort of unwillingness to extend itself in dangerous situations, or neutering as people who police themselves. We've had other violent crimes, obviously Bernard Getz, when he shot a bunch of people he felt threatened by on the subway in New York in the 70s or maybe early 80s. This is as vivid, graphic, clear-cut, unprovoked, a crime as I've ever seen portrayed photographically, ever. It shocked the hell out of me. And I imagine it has shocked people across the country. Its racial element, if there is one, is another.
No, there's clearly a racial element to this.
Well,
I
there is
mean,
in the discussion, but
in
we
the
have,
discussion, yeah.
but me trying to divine the motives of the killer, I have no fucking idea. I have no idea if he would have done that to a black woman. I have no idea. I refuse to run those analyses until I know more. But I will say this is the kind of thing that moves politics. It does. And that it was covered so lightly originally. That tape is not from yesterday. It's not from last week. It's from a couple of weeks ago, is it not?
Yeah, so this is part of the new, yeah, it is. And I'm assuming from what I've read, there was concern about it being inflammatory. And this is again, this is part of this
Concern
new
among whom?
The press folks.
The press, but the press didn't cover the crime with or without the
I know.
tape.
I know. But this is the new version of how the media works, which is let's pick and choose what we're going to talk about based on how we think people are going to react. If we think that they're not going to react in a proper fashion, then let's downplay it. Let's hold it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's
hold
what
it
people
till when?
Well, in some cases forever, right? So that's part of the problem.
I know of no world that I've been alive in America, no period that I've been alive, when the slitting of somebody's throat in an unprovoked fashion on public transportation, a place which we all potentially might find ourselves, and some find ourselves every day in order to get to work, is not news. I've never seen that happen before.
Right.
Especially when there is actual graphic video evidence of the nature and mood around the crime. And we just saw part of it. We also we didn't see the part where the guy, the perpetrator, alleged perpetrator, I guess, to be all sanitary about it, is tracking this woman's blood all over the freaking train car, walking around, dripping blood as people sheepishly look around and look up,
right,
hoping that they don't die, I would imagine. I see news suppression. Sorry.
So here we got somebody saying, LOL, now we've got a culture war issue so we can rampantly speculate and gloss through past high-profile murders. Videos of dead Palestinian kids are also shocking people across the country.
You know what? This is happening in my country. Okay. This is happening in a city where I know people. This is happening with media that I am responsive toward and can speak to in the same language. If you are such a monomaniac that you have only one issue, why are you here bothering me? Really, honestly, you want to draw everything into the same whirlpool, and you want to make your litmus test ultimate and ubiquitous. What are you doing here?
Right. And what's so frustrating about this, like, the reason I'm not...
Did you say that during George Floyd? Did you say that, back when in Missouri? Listen,
with
America,
Sandra Bland or Eric Garner or whatever. Yeah.
What? Like, I'm sorry to be such a smartass, but this is what we do in America. Is I coined the term traumocracy a couple of weeks ago. We do live in a traumocracy. I don't necessarily condone it. I don't think that extrapolating from individual events to policy is the way you should go around governing yourselves. I didn't think that in the wake of that shooting at the church 2 weeks ago. But did you say that then?
No, I don't know. Also, yeah,
Look your damn society in the eye. You know, if you know, look it in the eye. This was of public interest.
And I'm much more comfortable talking about this topic because I've covered so much crime in the United States. I've covered this issue of mentally ill people being on the streets, why they're on the streets. You know, there was a period when the policy was to, well, in some cities like Chicago, ironically, was to, after the funding was cut for mental health services, and there was less forcible commission of dangerous mentally ill people. Cops in big cities started finding reasons to put these folks in jail. The jails were not equipped to treat mentally ill people. They didn't have doctors, they didn't have medication. The people who were running, and I'm talking about jails, not prisons, because that's mostly where they ended up. Was they weren't convicted of crimes. They were arrested for things, usually put back out in the streets quickly, like this guy. But in the intervening period, this was like a strategy. It was like a way that city officials could deal with the problem without dealing with it, and they did this for years. Though somebody else mentioned Bill Weld emptying the mental hospitals in Massachusetts. I lived in Lynn, Massachusetts, which was the home of the biggest mental health complex in the state, or the second biggest. And I was there shortly after they emptied all those places, and it was terrifying and dangerous to live in that place. And the state and a lot of municipalities and towns responded to it by using the criminal justice system for a while. The criminal justice system revolted after a while, stopped taking them in, because saying it's not our job, which it isn't. And so these people who are extremely dangerous ended up on the street. And it was a game of hot potato between different types of officials who were making choices. Sometimes it was financial, sometimes it was ideological, sometimes it wasn't. In any case, this is the end game, right? You end up with people who are sort of brutally attacked, or people pushed in front of trains. There were cases like that. We saw the videos in New York with the person being set on fire, right? Remember that one? So I can look at that video and know what the background is historically, and I don't know that with some other things, right? So, and as you say, it's our country.
You see what I see here, and I'm agreeing with you. Okay, there are certain kinds of crimes in this country which are now crimes of sensation, near terrorism, where someone with a beef, someone with a belief system, someone with a manifesto goes out, commits a violent act in order to get famous, in order to get notorious, in order to publicize a view. And they do it in some symbolic way that becomes national news. Then there are crimes which appear to be exemplary or indicative of general trends. And this is one of the second kind. This is something that happened, and could happen anywhere, I suppose, but did happen here. And the issue that it seems to speak to is whether or not people who have 14 raps on their rap sheet should keep getting another chance to end up doing what this guy did. That's a legitimate issue. How you're going to police this, public transport is one thing, but how you're going to deal with people who are showing an arc toward violent behavior is another thing. Completely legitimate. I think that this is a really inconvenient piece of video for people who are stuck in the argument of whether Trump should go into Chicago, etc. That's why I think it was suppressed, to be completely frank with you, because it weighs rather heavily in favor of the really hardcore approach that Trump is advocating at a point when, that's the big national debate. That's what I think happened.
Right. Nate Menson says, wait, let's be real. We are all desensitized. We can watch school shootings and forget them in less than a week. Get real. Actually, I don't agree with that. It's true that we don't respond to things that we see on video, but
have you seen a school shooting in progress on video? I've never seen one. What is this guy talking about? This was an actual close-up, well-framed of the murder of a human being. And sorry that I have enough primal and residual horror in my soul at that kind of event.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I wrote a whole book about the Eric Garner thing.
I wish I were numb to it.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't wish it, but I'm not. I reject your premise, sir.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is people are still horrified by things. And especially, I mean, just look historically. The reason there was such a surge in interest in police abuse videos in 2014, like we hadn't seen those before the internet came around. Most of those incidents were print items in newspapers that made page 4 or 5. Sometimes they made the front page, but they were usually presented in a certain way. When they got dumped out onto the internet in a raw fashion, suddenly there was national interest in that topic for the first time. Now it went to a completely different place with the George Floyd incident. It was almost like there were two different waves of it. There was like an organic response, and then there was this massive activist enhanced response the second time around. But people absolutely are affected by affecting videos like that one.
And I mean, I was a little harsh on the commenter in the sense that, I'm saying I'm not numb and I'm rejecting the idea that we are generally. But if we are, do we want to be? Here's another problem. Maybe I'm tired and I'm out in the woods and I'm just not ready to sort of beat around the bush. This didn't happen with a gun. Therefore, it didn't fall into the pro or anti-gun narrative in a convenient way. Had it been a firearms crime, I sort of suspect it would have been discussed in those terms as another argument for, limiting gun rights. But this is what it isn't. I'm going to read you an Axios tweet from this morning. The gruesome video of the fatal knife attack on Irina Zarutska on a light rail car in Charlotte is drawing attention from MAGA influencers seeking to elevate the issue of violent urban crime and accuse mainstream media of undercovering shocking cases. So here is an outlet that did not cover the crime itself, but is covering the subsequent and alleged thought crime of MAGA influencers seeking to elevate the issue of urban crime. This is everything that's wrong with the media that I am surrounded by in one tweet. It's a phenomena. It's content. They discuss it in terms of the content, not in terms of the actual event. They discuss it in terms of who it's convenient for or who might be taking up the cause. It's the Republicans bounce thing, I guess. But it is not, if it is only MAGA influencers who are shocked by the, slicing of a woman's throat on public transportation, then score one for MAGA influencers, I'm afraid. And if it's only, certain media outlets that will cover this, and it was very few originally, very few, that did not include Axios as far as I know, then what is going on exactly? How far can you press the primitive mind into sort of third order effect reporting before it rebels and goes, hey man, I don't want to see people killed on fucking trains?
Right. No, I know. And they did that with so many different issues. Well, the Twitter files was one. I mean, this idea that whenever they write, only MAGA Republicans are paying attention to X issue. But yeah, how bizarre to characterize this thing as MAGA Republicans are concerned about maybe having your
MAGA influencers, not
MAGA
even
influencers.
not even regular voters, those awful MAGA influencers. Also, let me put on my liberal hat, okay? My good Minnesota boy grew up in the 70s with, the teachers who wore sandals hat. Isn't public transportation something that we could all agree saves money, saves fuel, is good for the environment, is a benefit to the commons, and should be protected such that people use it more and like using it and feel safe on it? Where is that angle? In other words, we're living in a society in which a lot of the liberal projects, which I find salutary, like public transportation, are being threatened by a bifurcation of around class, especially, and even around race, of those who will use it. Don't we all have an interest in riding the train peacefully to our destination? The train we all paid for with our taxes, that's saving us from having to use cars every 5 fucking seconds.
Right.
Why can't we talk about it in that way anymore? That's one way we used to talk about things.
No, I don't know. I guess crime now codes as a right-wing issue, so we can't talk about that.
Tell it to old Richard Mayor Daley of Chicago in the old days, when Chicago wasn't what it is now, but was still a democratic machine city where you faced the music if you fucked up Daley's, precious city on the lake. A lot has changed.
Yeah, I mean, Mario Cuomo, right, was the person who he used a jobs program that was passed the day after Martin Luther King was assassinated. He used the funding for that. It was a funding mechanism that was designed to create jobs for Black inner city kids. That was how he funded the construction of prisons in upstate New York in the early 80s. And that was the whole prison industrial complex thing started with that. That was one of the things that I found out when I was doing the Garner case. There was a time when politicians from both parties not only, well, they made an effort to look like they were taking on crime anyway. And as you say, it's not even in it's not even mentioned as if it's a real issue. I don't know. I'm confused by it.
Yeah. Well, as somebody who uses public transportation when it's in order, and who sent his kids to public schools, and, as I say, grew up in the state of equality and comedy, Minnesota, where everybody was afraid to buy a nice car because they might stick out,
Right.
compared to their neighbors. As somebody who was raised in that world, I think there are a lot of ways we could talk about this kind of thing that would redound to our mutual benefit, but suppressing it doesn't work, especially when it's this, literal, vivid, and, on the record. And making it always an example of something that it isn't.
Right.
Whether or not we should be in making it an example of why we should be doing something in Israel and Palestine. I mean, that's the kind of thinking that causes us not to look at our own world and not to do anything about our own world. And for it, and I am afraid causes it to deteriorate and make someone like Donald Trump, who's asking or demanding, the right to send in federal troops to stop crime possible. And if you don't see it, you're not paying attention.
Yep. All right. Well, we're kind of out of stuff to talk about, and I'm not. Today was kind of a depressing show. I don't know if I feel like sullying
The
Sherlock Holmes with this mood. So, how do you feel about tipping out a little early today? And,
Even before we did the show, I wasn't sure I wanted to solve Sherlock Holmes with the topics that I knew we would end up having to discuss.
Right.
Sherlock Holmes exists in a snow globe of Edwardian social stability, in which the biggest problems are a hound out on the moors, and so I don't think it fits.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm gonna go deal with the massive outcry at the things that I have not said, and we'll see you all later this week, folks. Thanks very much.